Hello, and welcome to Home Movie Day, a celebration of amateur films and filmmaking from Emory's collections. I'm Nina Rao, and I'm the audiovisual conservator for Emory Libraries. We're glad you can join us today for Emory's first ever Home Movie Day. So you may be wondering, what exactly is Home Movie Day? Home Movie Day is a series of events which take place all around the country and beyond to celebrate and exhibit home movies. Each October, individuals and families gather at Home Movie Day events to view these unique films and share them with their neighbors and community. Although right now we're meeting online instead of in person, we hope this screening today will be an opportunity to explore some interesting film from Emory's collections, consider film as a window into history, and talk a little bit about the work of film preservation. Perhaps if you're joining us, you might have home movies of your own. So we'll also talk about how to care for your home movies and keep them safe for future generations. Before we get started, when we say home movies, the type of film that we're talking about are motion pictures created by individuals, primarily for an intended audience of family and friends within the immediate circle of the home. The subject matter for these films typically would include family members, family events, and family activities. The films were usually edited, viewed, and stored in a home setting. And the type of film that would generally be used is a consumer gauge, such as 16mm, 8mm, or Super 8. So with me here today to talk about home movies in Emory's collections are John Bence, Rose Library Assistant Director and University Archivist, Randy Gue, Assistant Director of Collection Development and Curator of Political, Cultural, and Social Movements in Rose Library, and Carrie Bowden, Coordinator for Archives and Special Collections at Oxford College Library. So John is going to get us started with our first film. John?
Good afternoon. My first films come from the James Harvey Young collection, papers of which exist in the University Archives. James Harvey Young was a professor of history at Emory, born in 1915 in Brooklyn, New York. He grew up in Indiana and Illinois, and would have been around his late teens and early 20s when he made the films we're going to see today. He graduated from the University of Illinois in 1940. Got a job at Emory in 1941 and was a professor in the history department for that entire time. He passed away in 2006. But in 1933, when he was growing up in Indiana and Illinois, took a trip to the Century of Progress International Exposition, the World's Fair in Chicago in 1933. So in the films, we can't necessarily understand whether it was him who took them. They were part of his papers. They were small film canister reels, but we presume that it was him, or at least a family member of his, who took these films. And they start out with an image of what it would have been like to arrive at the 1933 International Exposition. You see cars whizzing by, you see a bus station, but also a very grand panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. Next, you'll see the Avenue of Flags, which was a big processional within the center of the campus that was the International Exposition that year. The Avenue of Flags dead end at the Hall of Science, which was one of the bigger exposition halls at the exposition. Next, you should see, among other things, the lagoon. A lot of the campus was organized around the lagoon within the campus of the expositions. Oh, there we go. I'll let this play a little bit. So here we see a lot of people arriving, presumably at the Century of Progress exposition, and with a grand view of the Chicago skyline across the water. Again, the Avenue of Flags. Down there at the distant end is the Hall of Science. We'll see a closer view of that later. The Sears and Roebuck buildings, a lot of large companies had their own pavilions. This is the lagoon. You could take a lagoon ride. And as it pans, you'll see a three-pronged building with three towers. That's the federal building. Those three prongs represented the three branches of government. that should be coming up on the right. And then further on the right, you see this large tower structure. This is the Sky Ride that provided a tram service across the campus of the exposition. And it went over the lagoon. Again, that's the Hall of Science. And a bunch of countries were sort of represented in the exposition. So this is the Italian Pavilion. This was a representation of what they were calling the Lama Temple, a recreation of a temple in China. And this is the Japanese Pavilion. And this particular film is going to end in the Swiss village, which was like recreated sort of Swiss village, and you'll see some of that here. I tried to find more information about these bears and couldn't. And that's it for film number 1. This is film number 3. We don't know if film number 2 exists, but here we see the sort of racetrack at the Chrysler building. General Motors, Chrysler, and Ford all had pavilions. And I can only presume that this was sort of a showcase of the sort of speed and durability of the cars. And so we'll see a little bit of this racetrack. You can see off to the left that another large pavilion building was the Travel and Transportation building, around which the General Motors and Chrysler building were organized. We're going to have a rather sharp transition to Standard Oil, the large, conglomerate. Standard Oil had a live power show, which had nothing to do with oil or electricity, and was an animal show. So you'll see some sad animals in cages. This represents in the Travel and Transportation building, one of the pageants that was put on for spectators was the From Wagons to Wings Transportation History pageant. So as you can see, there are steamships, various kinds of transportation will be highlighted in this kind of play pageant. And then this is the beginning of tape number 4. Again, we start in the Travel and Transportation building. We quickly move to Chrysler. This is the Chrysler building, and here's the General Motors building. What's interesting about the General Motors building, and we'll see it in a second, I can only presume this was a bad shot of a sunset, but up next will be General Motors actually created an assembly plant on site so that folks could see how cars were assembled. And then a number of these buildings I was unable to specifically identify, but you can see a lot of street scenes from the exposition and sort of various attractions and buildings. I believe this is a quick shot of Soldier Field whizzing by, which was also part of the exposition campus, and the Field Museum, which still exists today, obviously, as a museum on the lake shore. And that's it. That's the last of the James Harvey Young home videos. I hope you enjoyed them.
All right, thanks, John. You should also know that these reels were preserved and digitized through a grant from the National Film Preservation Foundation. So we are thankful for that support in making it possible to share the films with everyone.
Absolutely.
And so now next up is Randy Q.
Thanks, Nina. Good afternoon. How y'all doing? Our next home movie comes from the Stuart A. Rose Manuscript Archives and Rare Book Libraries, James Vinson Carmichael's papers, and it documents the Carmichael's family Christmas in 1948. Nina will tell you more about the film shortly, but first I want to tell you about James Vinson Carmichael. Carmichael was an Atlanta attorney, business leader, public servant, and Emory Law School graduate. He was born in Cobb County and established his law practice in Marietta after he finished school. During the 1930s, Carmichael was twice elected to the Georgia House of Representatives. And during World War II, he served as general manager of the Bell Bomber Plant in Marietta. Carmichael ran for governor of Georgia in 1946, and he won the popular vote, but he lost the election because of the state's county unit system. A year later, in 1947, Carmichael became the president of Scripto Pen Company, a position he held until 1964. These home movies feature the Carmichael family. In 1938, Carmichael married Frances Elizabeth McDonald, and at the time the movie was shot, the Carmichaels had two children, Mary Emma and James Carmichael Jr. As I mentioned earlier, this collection is the James Vinson Carmichael papers, and it consists of correspondence, subject files, journals, notebooks, printed material, scrapbooks, writings, and approximately 30 16mm home movies. Frances McDonald Carmichael donated this collection to Emory in 1978. And without further ado, I want to turn it back over to Nina to take you through the film.
All right, thank you, Randy. Okay, so there are several home movies in the Carmichael collection. And what stands out about this one in particular is that it has this narrative arc that unfolds through the editing and the homemade title cards. So it's always kind of a delight to find title cards in a home movie. And this reel has several of them which narrate the viewer through the course of events. So first we start with the letter to Santa. Some of the close-ups are a little bit out of focus, which I think also may be a reflection of the fact that the filmmaker is trying something a little bit new and different in this home movie. You'll also see that some of the footage is a little underexposed. Most of the reels in this collection are of events taking place outdoors, whereas this is primarily indoors. So that's another way in which this reel is trying something different and the filmmaker is maybe experimenting a little bit. So from the letter to Santa, we go to shots of the parents looking through the FAO Schwartz catalog. And then from here, you'll see there are close-ups of the pages in the catalog. Also note that even though the film is underexposed in places, the color is generally in very good condition. This reel was digitized this summer, so we are looking at images that were digitized from an almost 73-year-old motion picture. And the quality of the image, I think, that we see really speaks to the longevity of film as a medium. So here we see the train sets that were asked for in the letter to Santa. So the title cards, again, narrating the events. Now what we're seeing is the night before Christmas and so on. So there's a story that's really being told here, and the attention paid to editing and titles, I think, really speaks to the time and effort of the filmmaker in making this film. So I think one thing that we see in this reel and in all of the reels today is the way that home movies sort of start out as a way to capture memories and tell a story for one's own family, but over time they become historical documents. So for us as viewers 73 years later, we can watch a home movie and see, how did this family celebrate Christmas in 1948? How did they decorate their house? Who attended their gatherings? What kind of activities did they do? And part of that is also seeing how cultural norms change over time. So perhaps here we see that in the kids' costumes coming up. At the end of the movie, we also get a glimpse of the realities of African-American life and work in the South's segregated economy. So we'll briefly see two domestic workers who are spending some of their Christmas with the Carmichaels and not with their families. So part of the value in home movies is that they are these kind of windows into history, and they can often document domestic life at this very individual level with details that might not be captured in, say, a textbook or sort of a broader narrative of history. So I'm just going to let the rest of the reel play out from here. Okay, so next up is Carrie Bowden.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Nina. The 12 and a half minutes or so that we're going to share with you of what were originally Super 8 home movies are excerpted from the John Tate Film Collection, which consists of 23 reels of Super 8 film, averaging 3 to 4 minutes per reel. These came to us as a gift from Dr. Judy Greer 2 summers ago. Reverend Tate served a dual role in Oxford as pastor of Allen Memorial United Methodist Church and campus minister at Oxford College. Between 1966 and 1970, he filmed a variety of church, college, and family events. About 90% of the content was filmed in or features members of the Oxford community. At the time we received them, some of the reels were in need of emergency conservation, and many thanks to Nina for facilitating that, along with the physical and digital preservation of the entire collection in very short order. We had planned to share these films with the classes of 1970 and 1971 at their joint reunion earlier this fall, but those events were postponed. We're very happy today, though, to know that several members of those classes are joining us, especially Anne Slaughter, who has very generously provided us with opportunities to honor and understand her experience as the first Black woman to graduate from Oxford College. In 1968, she, Tony Gibson, and John Hammonds became the first Black students to attend the school. You'll see Mrs. Slaughter and Mr. Gibson in a few of the following clips. You'll also see some notable Oxford faculty and administrators from this era, including Dean Bond Fleming, Marshall Ellazar, and John Gregory. We hope you enjoy these films as much as we have, and that 50 some odd years after their creation, they provide some insight into the community of Oxford. And we can start playing them. There are 3 dances shown in these clips. The first is from fall 1969. It's hard to see in that shot, but this is Julie emerging from Humanities Hall after dismissing some classes. I don't think there's much I can say to explain this tradition in a way that doesn't raise more questions than it answers. So if you aren't familiar with the spirit of Emory, he has a webpage and you can email him, or we'd be happy to help you do some research in the archives. Here's another dance. This one was labeled as 1970, and this is the annual dance that was previously held in honor of Dooley's birthday. There are so many people in some of these group shots, and if you recognize anyone in particular, feel free to drop us an email or give us a call and let us know. This is Williams Gymnasium, and these shots were taken from the suspended track that runs around the entire gym. Intercut here by Reverend Tate is this brief glimpse inside Allen Memorial. Back to the gym. This space is still used for dance. It isn't clear from the labeling if this was a special event or if Reverend Tate just happened to capture the gem on an especially active day. This is a view of the quad, the Oxford College quad, from the second floor of Humanities Hall. From the northeast corner of Pierce Street and Wesley Street at the north edge of campus, this is a residence hall, two residence halls actually, that were roughly where the Oxford Science Building is now. They were referred to as Branham and East. That building is still there. It is now been renovated into the Oxford Student Center, renovated and expanded. And this is inside that building, or I think it is at least. I would love it if somebody could confirm for me if this is the dining hall. It looks like it is. This is the then brand new Oxford College Library, where I'm speaking to you from right now, but also after a major renovation and expansion. And the woman in the yellow dress is Dr. Judy Greer, the first woman to achieve the rank of full professor at Oxford College, among many other distinctions. And many thanks to Dr. Greer for all her support and entrusting these films to the Oxford College Archives.
All right, and thank you, Carrie. So those are some of the home movies in Emory's collections, but if you're watching this, you or someone in your family may have home movies too. And those films are important. They're important to your family and also potentially to scholars and historians. So how to take care of home movies. I'm gonna share some information on that. So how to take care of home movies. So first thing, keep the original films. That's the most important thing. Film is actually very stable. if kept at the right environment, and can last for a long time, much longer than a VHS tape or DVD typically. The technology to digitize and view films will change over time, but if you have the originals in good condition, you can always make new viewing copies. So what is a good environment for film? Generally, it's someplace cool and dry, away from hot temperatures, high humidity, and dampness. So you want to avoid things like a hot attic, a damp basement, or a garage where the temperature fluctuates a lot. You want someplace cool, stable, and out of direct sunlight. And then you want to store your film in a container that can breathe rather than something airtight. So if they're in the original cardboard box or a film can that isn't tightly closed, those are both good options. If they're in plastic bags, it's probably better to take them out so they can have some airflow. If you're interested in additional resources on home movies, here are some links. So the first is the Center for Home Movies. This site has guidance on caring for home movies, advice on transferring films to digital formats, and links to service providers who can do that. If you have home movies and they're not in great shape, if they seem warped or they're giving off kind of a vinegary smell, those are signs that the film is deteriorating, and you may, in that case, want to have a digital copy made. So this is a good site to find a place to do that. Film Forever is also a great resource for preserving films at home. You can find a lot of information here on inspecting your films, cleaning them, repairs, digitization, storage, equipment, suppliers, and all sorts of things. Lastly, if you're interested in exploring donating your films to Emory, you can also reach out to Rose Library or Oxford College Library at these email addresses, or Oxford also by phone. So here's the information for that. And like Carrie said, if there's additional information that you see in the Oxford Reels that you'd like to contribute, that would also be great too. So we hope this has been an interesting look into the film collections at Emory. If you want to explore home movies even further, you can also visit the Center for Home Movies website and find links to Home Movie Day events happening all over. So thank you, John, Randy, and Carrie for presenting these films today. Thank you all so much for joining us for Home Movie Day.